You open your wallet expecting nothing unusual, nothing different from the day before, but something subtle stirs inside you, a quiet shift you cannot name yet. You feel it before you understand it, the sense that a boundary, one you carried for years, has quietly dissolved, and you realize this change began the moment you placed a single scripture inside your wallet. A phrase so short, so simple, that it almost feels impossible for it to carry any real force. Yet you sense it. Something is rearranging itself around you. You don't know why, but you feel watched, not by the world, but by something compassionate, something steady, something that answers without words. You feel accompanied, as if wealth itself has taken a step closer, as if opportunities that once ignored you are now turning their heads in your direction. You feel a quiet pressure, like life is preparing to reveal something you weren't ready to see before. But alongside this shift comes a warning, subtle but unmistakable, the kind of warning that appears only when you are standing on the edge of transformation, because the scripture in your wallet is not a charm. It is not a superstition. It is not a lucky symbol meant to coax fortune out of hiding. When you place this verse close to your money, you are not decorating your wallet. You are confronting your state of consciousness. And consciousness reacts. Sometimes gently, sometimes violently. Always truthfully. You may notice small disruptions at first. A bill arrives earlier than expected, an opportunity slips away, a conversation exposes a fear you thought you had buried long ago. You feel tested, stretched, challenged. But this challenge is not punishment. It is reordering. It is the old structure losing its grip, resisting its collapse. Because for wealth to come to you, the version of yourself who lived in fear must dissolve. The identity that held scarcity close must step aside, and this transition can feel like losing balance even when you're finally learning how to stand. You begin to notice odd coincidences throughout your days. A message about abundance appears while you're thinking about expenses. Someone mentions an opportunity right after you silently wished for one. A forgotten debt is repaid to you. A new idea arrives with a clarity you can't explain. And part of you wonders whether these things are random, or whether the verse inside your wallet is acting as a mirror for your inner world, reminding you of something you had forgotten, that your source is not outside you. It never was. Wherever you go, I am with you. The scripture whispers this to you every time you reach for your wallet. Not as a religious command, but as a psychological revelation. A reminder that the creative power you once thought was distant is actually the very awareness looking through your eyes. You begin to feel a subtle confidence rising within you, a softness, a steadiness, a knowing. You stop chasing money the way you once did, because now you sense that the real flow of wealth begins inside you. And as this inner shift grows, the outer world responds, slowly at first, then suddenly, like a dam giving way to a long-awaited river. You start to notice something else too. The world seems to approach you differently. A conversation goes better than expected. An idea becomes actionable. A small opportunity becomes a doorway. People seem to trust you more. You trust yourself more. And you realize the scripture didn't change your wallet, it changed your state. This is where your journey begins. With one verse, one decision, one shift in the place where money and consciousness meet. By the end of this video, you will understand why this scripture transforms your relationship with wealth, why individuals who quietly use it experience breakthroughs they can't explain, and how you can allow this same force to operate in your life, with intention, not superstition. You are not learning how to attract money. You are learning how to embody the state from which money has no choice but to come. And it begins now. You hold the scripture in your hand and feel something you can't quite explain. It's small, almost weightless, but there's a pressure inside you, a sort of gravitational pull that wasn't there before. You read the words again, quietly, slowly, letting them sink into the places where you've carried doubt for years. Wherever you go, I am with you. At first, it looks like a simple promise, a comforting phrase. But the longer you sit with it, the more you sense it trying to speak to you in a way you never allowed before. You feel that this verse isn't describing a distant deity watching you from above. It's pointing to something much closer, something within you, something that has always traveled with you, even when you felt most abandoned by life. You start to realize that the power in this scripture lies not in the words themselves, but in what those words are awakening in your consciousness. You're not being told that a supernatural guardian is following you around. You are being reminded that your awareness, your imagination, your inner creator, the true source of your reality, never leaves your side. It follows you into every store, every conversation, every financial decision. It enters the bank with you. It stands beside you when you open bills. It breathes with you when you feel afraid of not having enough. And for the first time, you begin to grasp why people who keep this scripture in their wallets experience such dramatic shifts. The verse converts your wallet from a symbol of fear into a symbol of companionship. You're no longer alone with your financial worries. You're no longer standing in a cold, indifferent universe hoping someone notices your need. Instead, you're walking with the very force that shapes experience. You're carrying the source of wealth, not its shadow. As you sit with this truth, something deep inside you loosens. A tension you've carried for years quietly breaks open. You start to question how many decisions in your life were made from fear. Fear of not having enough, fear of losing what you had, fear of being judged, fear of failing, and you realize how often your wallet was a trigger for these fears, a reminder of everything you lacked, a record of the limits you believed you couldn't cross. But now, when you place the scripture inside your wallet, something extraordinary happens. The object that once symbolized scarcity becomes a portal to a different state of consciousness. Each time you open it, you are confronted not with fear, but with a message of inner power, a message that says, the one who creates your world walks with you. You begin to understand that wealth has less to do with money and everything to do with the state you carry. Neville Goddard taught that the world is a mirror, reflecting back the assumption you hold about yourself. If you assume lack, the mirror shows you lack. If you assume abundance, the mirror shifts. Not because money magically appears out of nowhere, but because your perception, your decisions, your actions, and your opportunities reorganize themselves around the state you embody. And suddenly, the scripture becomes more than a phrase. It becomes an entry point into a new identity. You're not someone trying to attract money anymore. You are someone who carries the source of creation everywhere you go. The moment this understanding begins to root itself in your mind, your relationship with money starts to change. You feel less urgency, less desperation, less dependence on circumstances. You feel supported, not by luck, but by a deeper intelligence that operates within you. Decisions feel clearer, risks feel less threatening, possibilities feel closer. You notice that doubt doesn't grip you as tightly. You notice that fear loses its sharp edges. You notice that your imagination, once cluttered with anxiety, begins to open again. You start imagining outcomes that once felt impossible. And you don't just imagine them, you believe in them. You believe in them because you no longer see yourself as a powerless observer. You see yourself as the one who walks with the creative source, the one who carries it into every moment, the one who shapes reality from within. This is why the scripture awakens your wealth, not because it changes the world outside you, but because it changes the one who walks into that world. You place the verse into your wallet, you close it gently, and you feel the shift start to happen. You hold your wallet in your hands and realize something you've never fully acknowledged. This small object has silently dictated your emotional life for years. Every time you opened it, you felt a story rising inside you, sometimes shame, sometimes uncertainty, sometimes stress disguised as responsibility. Even when there was money inside, the fear of losing it lingered like a shadow just out of sight. Your wallet wasn't just a container, it was a trigger. That is why placing the scripture there matters. Not because the paper is magical, but because you're inserting meaning into the exact place where your fears used to live. You're placing a new voice inside a space that once echoed with doubt. You're interrupting a story you didn't realize you were still telling yourself. When you slide the scripture into your wallet, you're doing more than storing words. You're symbolically relocating your source of security. You're removing it from numbers, balances, jobs, and circumstances, and returning it to the only place Neville Goddard ever pointed to, your inner state. You begin to feel something subtle happening. The wallet, once a symbol of limitation, becomes a reminder of presence. You open it, and instead of recoiling from what you see, you meet the words, "Wherever you go, I am with you." The moment your eyes land on them, your old story hesitates. It stutters. It loses momentum, because now you're no longer facing the world alone. Now you're walking with your awareness of the creative force within you, and you feel the shift. You think back on all the times your wallet made you feel small, those moments when you hesitated before making a purchase, when you avoided looking at your account, when you told yourself you had to accept less because you were afraid of running out. You remember how your body tightened without your permission, how your mind spiraled into worry even when nothing was wrong yet. You didn't realize it then, but your wallet had become a symbol of survival rather than abundance. So when you place the scripture inside it, you are rewriting the emotional meaning of the object. You're turning it from a reminder of fear into a reminder of power. You're taking something that triggered anxiety and converting it into something that triggers awareness. Neville taught that objects become extensions of your state of consciousness. They carry the emotional associations you feed them. A wedding ring, a key, a letter, each one can hold meaning far beyond its physical existence. Your wallet is no different. It holds the story of who you believed you were in relation to money. By placing the scripture inside, you are planting a new belief in the soil of an old symbol. The moment you recognize this, your internal dialogue begins to change. You stop asking, "Do I have enough?" And you start asking, "What state am I in right now?" You stop panicking at unexpected expenses. You start interpreting them through the lens of abundance. I am accompanied by the creative power that supplies everything I need. You stop shrinking yourself in financial conversations. You start speaking from a grounded sense of worth. You stop checking your balance with dread. You start checking it with neutrality, even gratitude, because you know money isn't the source. It's the shadow cast by your state. And gradually, unbelievably, the wallet that once felt like a weight starts feeling lighter. Not because the money inside has changed yet, but because you have. You no longer open it with the same emotional posture. You no longer brace yourself. The scripture acts like a subtle anchor, pulling your awareness back to your power every time your old conditioning tries to reappear. You begin to feel a new kind of steadiness, a quiet authority that has nothing to do with arrogance and everything to do with inner alignment. You're not pretending to be wealthy. You're not forcing confidence. You're simply remembering that the source of your experience walks with you, that the creative force is inside you, that your imagination is the real provider. You see now why people who place this scripture in their wallet start noticing strange, almost unbelievable shifts in their finances. The paper isn't performing miracles. Your consciousness is. Your identity is rearranging itself. Your assumptions are changing shape, and your world must follow. Because once you understand that the wallet no longer defines you, you become someone who defines the wallet. You close it gently, and you feel the verse pulsing like a quiet heartbeat inside. A reminder, a companion, a new story unfolding from within you, one page at a time. You place the scripture in your wallet, believing at first that nothing will happen. Maybe you expect a slow shift, a quiet improvement, a subtle feeling of comfort. You don't expect disruption. You don't expect sudden changes. You don't expect the world around you to press against your old identity so quickly. But it does. It always does. Because the moment you adopt a new state of consciousness, especially one as powerful as abundance, your reality begins to respond. And often it reacts before you fully understand what you've activated. You begin noticing small disturbances first. A familiar routine breaks. A plan collapses. Someone withdraws. A door you thought was stable shuts without warning. And you wonder why it feels like the moment you try to improve your life, everything becomes unsettled. But what you're feeling is not failure. It is not rejection. It is not the universe resisting you. It is your old state dissolving. You've carried scarcity for years, sometimes silently, sometimes loudly. You've made decisions from it. You've built habits around it. You've accepted limitations because you believed you had no choice. You've shaped your behavior around fear without realizing it. And when the scripture enters your wallet, it enters your consciousness. It interrupts the pattern. It pulls you into a different assumption about yourself. Your world, sensing this shift, begins clearing out everything that no longer matches who you are becoming. And the clearing never feels gentle. Neville Goddard said the world reflects your internal state with mathematical precision. It cannot contradict the self you assume to be. When you step into a new identity, one aligned with wealth, worthiness, and provision, everything that belonged to the old identity begins to crumble. Not because you're being punished, but because your new state cannot stand on the foundations of your former fears. So the universe pushes, life rearranges itself, and what you experience feels like shock. You may feel a sudden urge to clean your environment, to remove old objects, to reorganize your space. You may find yourself declining invitations you once accepted without thinking. You may lose interest in conversations that drain you. People who matched your old energy may drift away without explanation. And while part of you panics, another part feels free, lighter, as if something heavy has been quietly removed from your shoulders. This is the invisible shock Neville spoke about. The moment your reality adjusts to your new assumption faster than your mind can process. But the shift isn't only external. Something internal begins to stir as well. You notice old beliefs resurfacing, not to stay, but to be confronted. Doubts rise like ghosts asking for permission to remain. Thoughts like, who am I to live this way? What if this doesn't work? What if I'm being unrealistic? What if things get worse? But you also notice something else, something new. A voice that wasn't loud before, a voice that feels steady, warm, almost ancient. It whispers through the scripture inside your wallet, wherever you go, I am with you. This voice doesn't erase your fear, it outgrows it. It doesn't argue with your doubt. It makes your doubt irrelevant. It doesn't promise safety. It promises presence. And presence changes everything. You begin understanding that the shock you're experiencing is not chaos. It's reorganization. The old version of you, the one who feared not having enough, had dependencies you never questioned. You accepted jobs that drained you. You tolerated situations that didn't honor you. You stayed small because you believed that was the safest way to survive. But the new version of you cannot breathe inside those same walls. So they fall. One by one, they fall. And as each wall collapses, you feel exposed, vulnerable, but also undeniably alive. You're not collapsing, you're expanding. You're stepping into a state where wealth isn't something you chase, but something that emerges as a natural consequence of who you believe yourself to be. What you're feeling is alignment disguised as disruption, growth disguised as inconvenience, breakthrough disguised as instability. This is the shock that comes before clarity, before momentum, before manifestation. It is the shaking of the ground before the seed breaks open. It is the tension that precedes transformation. You breathe deeply. You touch your wallet. You feel the scripture inside it like a quiet heartbeat, and you understand, finally, that your world isn't falling apart. It is falling into place. You open your wallet, and before your mind even registers the numbers, your eyes fall upon the scripture. Just a few words, simple, unassuming, but something inside you shifts every time you read them. You don't force it. You don't try to make anything happen. The shift occurs on its own, like a reflex you never knew you had. And slowly, you begin to understand why this verse carries such power, not because it changes your circumstances directly, but because it changes the state from which you meet every circumstance. You read the words again, "Wherever you go, I am with you." And before you even interpret them, something softens in your body. The grip of fear loosens. The familiar tightening of anxiety fades. Your breath becomes deeper without you trying. It's as if your nervous system recognizes a truth your mind has not yet articulated. You start to see how your reactions to money were never really about money. They were about the state you were in, a state that believed it was on its own, a state that saw the world as scarce, a state that felt unsupported, unprotected, unseen. You carried that state into every store, every transaction, every decision about your future. You didn't know you were doing it. You only felt the consequences. And now, every time you open your wallet, the scripture calls you back to a deeper awareness. It gently interrupts the old pattern. It reminds you that your source is not the money you hold, but the consciousness that shapes your world. It brings you into a state where wealth is no longer something you beg for, but something you express from the inside. Neville Goddard taught that the creative act begins long before the physical result. It begins in the moment you assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Most people try to change their circumstances while remaining in a state of fear. They try to attract abundance while imagining themselves as lacking. They pray for solutions while feeling unworthy of receiving them. And because the world mirrors the state, not the words, nothing changes. But when you place the scripture in your wallet, you create a bridge between your physical actions and your inner state. You embed meaning in a place you encounter daily. You turn an ordinary object into a trigger for remembrance. And the more often you encounter it, the more automatic the shift becomes. You begin to feel different, not because anything external has changed yet, but because you are meeting your life from a different internal center. You feel more supported, more grounded, more capable. You respond instead of reacting. You pause before spiraling. You breathe before fearing. You choose before collapsing into old patterns. This is how the scripture activates your creative state, by changing who you believe you are in the moment you face your world. You're not trying to become wealthy anymore. You're assuming the identity of someone who already walks with abundance, not because of the numbers in your account, but because of the source you feel within. Slowly, your imagination becomes clearer. Your desires become gentler. Your vision of the future becomes more believable. You find it easier to imagine outcomes that once felt impossible. You find it easier to feel worthy of them. And as this state settles into you, your actions begin to change, subtly at first, then boldly. You no longer hesitate when opportunities appear. You no longer shrink in situations where you once felt small. You no longer defer your dreams to a future that never arrives. You feel aligned, composed, capable. This scripture reminds you that the creative intelligence you once searched for outside is actually the quiet awareness inside you, the one observing your thoughts, the one experiencing your desires, the one capable of forming an assumption and watching the world reorganize itself around it. Every time you read the verse, you step into that awareness. every time you open your wallet, you reaffirm your identity. Every time you encounter the scripture, you return to the state that creates wealth instead of fears it. You begin to understand that abundance isn't something you call from afar. It's something you awaken from within. It's a state of connection, not effort. A state of knowing, not striving. A state of presence, not desperation. This is why the scripture works. It doesn't activate magic. It activates you, the version of you that remembers its power, the version of you that walks with creative authority, the version of you that does not fear money because it understands its source. You place your wallet back into your pocket, but this time it feels different, not heavier, not lighter, but alive. Alive with a new meaning, alive with a new identity, alive with a quiet certainty that wealth is no longer something outside your reach, because now you are meeting the world from the state that naturally produces it. You think you've crossed a threshold. You feel the shift happening. You sense the calm strengthening inside you, the new identity taking form. And then, without warning, the old state tries to return. It doesn't knock. It doesn't announce itself. It slips back into your life through the smallest crack, wearing the same voice it used to wear, whispering the same fears you used to accept without question. It arrives as an unexpected bill, a delay, a mistake, a conversation that stirs old insecurities, a moment where something goes wrong at the worst possible time. It arrives exactly when you begin to feel confident, exactly when you start believing something new about yourself, exactly when you think the shift is complete. And suddenly, you feel the familiar tremor inside your chest. The old reflexes tighten. Your mind starts racing in directions you thought you had outgrown. A thought rises, subtle but sharp. See? Nothing really changed. But this is the moment Neville Goddard warned about. The moment when the old state makes its final attempt to survive. The moment when the old identity refuses to surrender quietly. You are not being punished. You are being tested for stability, not by the universe, not by fate, but by the remnants of a self you no longer want to carry. The old state doesn't disappear the moment you choose abundance. It dissolves through repetition, through awareness, through persistence. And when it feels itself fading, it tries to pull you back with a familiar emotional gravity, not because it is strong, but because it is dying. This test doesn't come to break you. It comes to reveal you. It shows you whether your new state is a preference or an identity. You feel the old emotions rise, fear, doubt, panic, but something is different now. You're watching the emotion instead of becoming it. You're observing the fear instead of collapsing into it. You're noticing the old reactions instead of obeying them. This awareness is the first sign that the shift is real. In this moment, when the old reality tries to reclaim you, you reach for your wallet. Not out of desperation, but out of recognition. You touch the scripture inside, you breathe, you let the verse rise through you like a reminder from a deeper self. Wherever you go, I am with you. When you hear those words within yourself, the fear doesn't vanish instantly, but it loses authority. It no longer dictates your decisions. It no longer defines your identity. It becomes noise rather than truth. You begin to understand that the test is not in the circumstance itself. The test is in your self-concept. The test asks, are you who you used to be or who you've decided to become? The moment you choose the new identity, despite the pressure, despite the discomfort, the old state cracks. Not in a dramatic, cinematic way, but in a quiet, irreversible way. A fracture forms, a dissolution begins. The old state can no longer claim ownership over your reactions, and that is how you pass the test. not by pretending everything is perfect, not by forcing positivity, not by ignoring what's happening, but by refusing to return to the old version of yourself. You remind yourself, you are not someone who fears money anymore. You are not someone who worships outcomes anymore. You are not someone who negotiates your worth with circumstances. You walk with the creative power inside you. You respond from presence, not panic. When you choose this identity, even in the middle of discomfort, the old state breaks apart. The illusion that once controlled you becomes thin, transparent, powerless. The pressure fades. The anxiety loosens its grip, and you feel yourself returning to the calm you thought you had lost. This is the turning point. This is the moment your new state becomes real, because you chose it when the evidence pointed elsewhere, and strangely, almost immediately, something in your outer world shifts. A problem resolves, a delay gets corrected, a sudden opportunity appears, a path opens where there was no path. You realize that the moment you refused to bow to the old state, the external situation no longer had any reason to remain the same. This is how creation works. Your world doesn't change when your circumstances improve. Your world changes when your identity stabilizes. You place the wallet back into your pocket. You feel lighter, clearer, stronger. The test didn't defeat you, it crowned you. You didn't protect your new state, you became it. There comes a moment, quiet, almost unremarkable at first, when everything begins to feel different. You can't point to a specific event. You can't trace it to a phone call or a sudden opportunity. You simply wake up one day and feel a shift inside you. A calm certainty, a groundedness that wasn't there before. A quiet knowing that you are no longer chasing money. You are attracting it by existing in a different state. This is the moment when money begins to look for you. You don't rush. You don't force. You don't bargain with life the way you used to. You move differently, not with arrogance, but with a subtle, unwavering confidence. You walk into rooms as someone who carries a source within, not as someone hoping the world will grant permission. You feel a soft sense of companionship, as if something always walks beside you. And you know exactly what it is. The scripture in your wallet becomes more than a reminder. It becomes a reflection of your new identity. Each time you see the words, "Wherever you go, I am with you," you no longer feel comforted. You feel aligned. You feel confirmed. You feel recognized by a deeper part of yourself that has been waiting for this state all along. You begin to notice that your decisions flow more naturally. The hesitation that used to cloud your mind fades. The fear that once weighed down your chest dissolves. You trust your impulses, not the frantic, anxious impulses of the old self, but the calm, intuitive impulses of someone who knows they are guided. You say yes to things that feel expansive. You release things that drain you without guilt or doubt. And slowly, the world responds. A conversation that seemed meaningless leads to an unexpected opportunity. A project that once felt stuck begins to move again. A client returns with an offer that pays more than you expected. A person you barely know opens a door you didn't realize existed. A problem resolves itself without your intervention. You begin to realize that wealth does not arrive through strain. It arrives through alignment. It arrives through the identity you assume. It arrives because you stopped making money responsible for your safety and placed that responsibility back into your consciousness. Neville Goddard taught that the state of consciousness you occupy determines the shape of your world. When you lived in the state of scarcity, life mirrored scarcity. When you lived in the state of fear, life mirrored fear. But now you live in a state of inner abundance, steady, assured, rooted in the awareness of your own creative power. And the world must mirror that. It has no choice. You begin to see something extraordinary happening in your daily life. Things you once perceived as coincidences now appear as natural expressions of your new identity. You walk with a sense of inevitability, Not the brittle confidence of forcing outcomes, but the quiet certainty of someone who knows the outcome already exists in the unseen and is simply unfolding in time. You stop thinking, "How will money come?" You begin thinking, "I wonder how it will show up this time." You become curious instead of desperate, expectant instead of fearful, open instead of guarded. This is the turning point. You feel liberated from the emotional weight that money once held over you. You see it for what it truly is, an expression of your internal state, a reflection of your self-concept, a neutral resource that responds to your identity, not your effort. And almost miraculously, though it is not a miracle at all, you find that opportunities begin to pursue you. People sense your confidence. They feel your clarity. They trust your energy in ways they can't articulate. Doors open because you walk differently. Money flows because you think differently. You no longer chase, you attract, you allow, you receive. You start seeing yourself as the source rather than the seeker. And the more you accept this truth, the easier everything becomes. Effort feels lighter, choices feel clearer, paths feel smoother. Life becomes cooperative rather than combative. You look at your wallet, once heavy with fear, and you feel nothing but ease. It no longer controls you. It no longer defines your identity. It no longer dictates your emotional state. The scripture inside has become a symbol of the wealth consciousness you now live in. This is the state Neville spoke of when he said that your assumption, when persisted in, will harden into fact. You have persisted. You have endured the dissolving of the old state. You have stabilized the new one. And now, money isn't something you chase. It's something that recognizes you. It moves toward you because you've become the version of yourself that naturally receives it. You've stepped into the identity where wealth is normal, expected, and deeply aligned with who you are. You are no longer the one searching for abundance. You are the one abundance searches for. You hold your wallet again, but it doesn't feel like the object it used to be. You remember the version of yourself who once opened it with worry, with hesitation, with quiet fear. You remember how tightly you held onto every dollar because you believed money was the only lifeline you had. You remember how small you felt when numbers dropped, how anxious you became when circumstances changed, how powerless you felt when life pushed against you. And now, you feel none of that. You open your wallet and see the scripture resting inside, soft, steady, unassuming. The same words, the same paper. But your relationship to it is completely different. It is no longer a lifeline. It is no longer something you look to for comfort. It has become a mirror reflecting the identity you now carry. Wherever you go, I am with you. You read the words not as a promise from outside, but as a confirmation from within. A reminder that you walk with creative authority. A reminder that your imagination, your awareness, your inner state is the true source of everything you experience. You don't reach for security in the world anymore. You bring security into the world from the state you occupy, and as you sit with this truth, something inside you settles even deeper than before, a calm that feels like understanding, a confidence that doesn't need to be spoken, a knowing that cannot be unlearned. You see clearly now what Neville Goddard meant when he said that your world is yourself pushed out. You understand that money was never the issue. The issue was the state you lived in, the fear you carried, the assumptions you believed, the identity you repeated until it felt like truth. The scripture didn't change your reality. You changed your reality by letting the scripture change you. You became someone who doesn't chase money because you no longer feel separate from your source. You became someone who doesn't fear loss because you no longer believe your safety depends on external conditions. You became someone who doesn't cling to the old story because the new one feels too natural to deny. This transformation didn't happen in a single moment. It happened in the pauses, in the hesitations, in the quiet decisions you made when nobody was watching. You chose to remain in the new state when the old one tried to pull you back. You chose to respond with faith when fear resurfaced. You chose to anchor yourself in the truth of your being rather than in the evidence of your circumstances. And because you persisted, your world began to rearrange itself with unmistakable precision. Opportunities appeared, paths opened, people shifted, money flowed, not because you forced it, but because you became aligned with the version of yourself that naturally receives abundance. You see now that wealth has nothing to do with luck, nothing to do with chances, nothing to do with whether the world favors you. Wealth is a state of consciousness, and you entered it the moment you realized that the creative power is always with you, walking where you walk, acting where you act, unfolding through your assumptions. So now you close your wallet gently, not with fear, not with urgency, but with reverence. You know what you carry, you know who you've become, you know what your state will continue to produce, and you step forward into your life with a new awareness. Money is not something you earn, it is something you express. Abundance is not something you chase, it is something you embody. Reality is not something you endure, it is something you create through the identity you assume. The scripture remains in your wallet, but its real home is now inside you. You walk with the awareness that wherever you go, the creative force goes with you. Wherever you stand, abundance stands with you. Wherever you move, life reorganizes itself around the state you bring into it. You are no longer waiting for change. You are the change. And from this point on, your world can only rise to meet the self you have finally allowed yourself to become.